Good morning, everyone. Just wanted to say thank you for hosting me and for having me. I'm really excited to be here, and it's a beautiful experience being able to exchange and share stories with people across the country who are really, as was said in the introductions, really trying to fight for the same things. And I'm really happy to spend time with you, and grateful for the organizers for bringing me out here. So good morning, and thank you for coming too on a Saturday morning. So I am supposed to tell stories. So I'm just going to start with what I know. So again, my name's Miya Yoshitani. I'm actually not born, but raised pretty much in the Midwest. I grew up outside of Chicago, but ended up in California because I really wanted to become a community organizer in the Asian Pacific Islander community, and I got basically talked into coming to California when I was in my early 20s, and started as a youth organizer in the Bay Area in a city called Richmond, California. So I started, maybe if you can put the next slide up. Yeah. So this is just a picture of skyline in Richmond, California, just to give you a sense of where we are here. Yeah, exactly. When I flew into Billings at night, Olivia pointed out to me, it's like that sort of sparkly, that's the refinery. It's just like Richmond, made me feel at home. Yeah, so in Richmond, California, there is there's actually, in the whole area, there's a number of refineries. There's over 250 industrial sites in Richmond. So APEN, the organization that I started working for, has been an environmental justice organization founded in 1993. I came in about 96. Founded to organize people and build power for people who are living at the intersection of poverty, of pollution, and of racism. And so this is like the neighborhood that I've been organizing in for a couple decades. And I wanted to first tell the story of one of our members to give you a sense of who we've been organizing with. So this is actually one of our members' aunties. So the person I was going to tell the story is, when I was 26 and I came to APEN to do organizing work, I met a young high school student. Her name's Sandy. And maybe if you could go one forward. Oh, there's Sandy. There's Sandy with her son, Tutu. So that's Sandy now. Sandy was 15 when I first met her, and she had grown up next to that refinery. She was actually born in Laos. And who's heard in the news lately, President Obama was just in Laos, and he announced all this funding going to decommission some of the thousands or millions of tons of ammunition, of bombs that were left unexploded during the war. This is some good news, but this is where Sandy came from. She was born in Laos, and she was born in a Thai refugee camp. Her parents were born in Laos, but her parents were actually part of, or her grandfather worked for the U.S. military during the Vietnam War. And as there were, Laos has the most number of bombs. It was bombed more per capita than any other country in history. And as well as having Agent Orange rain down upon it, and a whole bunch of chemical warfare. So her family fled at the end of the war after having worked with the U.S. military they could not stay anymore. And so Sandy was born in a refugee camp across the Mekong River in Thailand and spent her early childhood there, and then ended up in Richmond. And in Richmond, when she was growing up, the refinery used to catch on fire or explode every once in a while. And when I first met Sandy, she would tell stories about how in the playground that she used to play in, right next to the refinery, she could see the smoke from the refinery incinerator coming up over her playground. And she said that she actually used to look forward to the explosions that would happen at the refinery, because that meant they would put money in her bank account in a trust fund for when she was older. And so she was looking forward to being able to spend that $1,000 when she was 18, which really struck me deeply when I first started working there, that Sandy had no idea what the health impact on her family was. This is her son who has asthma, and who actually was, when he was 1 year old, he was diagnosed with a very rare form of cancer of the kidney, and he's fine now, thank goodness. But Sandy and her family have experienced a huge number of health problems. She was raised by a single mom, really struggled, and so that money actually meant a lot to her. But at what cost? At what cost was she having to live in a place where the trade-off between jobs and health, or economic stability and your health, was what she was faced with every day. But Sandy has grown up as a part of APEN, and she's actually an organizer now, and she works for APEN, building power in the community and really trying to engage other community members in this shift that we're trying to make. So APEN, for many years, we spent fighting, battling the impacts of the refinery and of other local pollution. And we were really successful in a few things. We were able to fight with the Laotian community to get a multilingual warning system. So when the refinery blows up, we would get phone calls to our houses, but in English. And the Laotian community had no idea that what they were telling us on the phone was, don't go outside, shelter in place, put a towel under your door, and make sure that you don't expose your kids to the air outside. And instead, they were going outside because they could hear the sirens, and they were trying to ask their neighbors about what was going on. And so we installed the first multilingual warning system, so they would get emergency warnings in their language, and in about 12 other languages in Richmond, for the mostly immigrant, low-income community that lives there. But I told the story, I want to tell the story of Sandy, because it's a story that is really powerful about how the community has come together and they're not living as victims of the conditions that they're living with every day, but they're joining together and fighting for something different, something new, something alternative. So we spent many years kind of fighting for a reduction in emissions in the refinery, the refinery is also one of the heaviest contributors to greenhouse gases in the state. It's not only one of the biggest polluters in the state, but it's one of the industries that the state of California is now trying to better regulate to reduce greenhouse gases, so the rest of us are not experiencing the type of climate change that unfortunately is already on its way. But living at that intersection means that the Laotian community there and the other low-income communities of color that live in Richmond are the first and worst hit by the impacts of climate change. And that also means how it's impacting our local economy. And after years of fighting with the refinery for at least to be able to breathe clean air, with children who are living with some of the highest rates of asthma in the state, being able to change air quality conditions is really important. But what we found is that we needed to also shift about maybe 5 or 6 years ago from not just the oppositional, but the propositional. And we tried to get our community together to figure out, well, what do we actually want instead? You know, we've been fighting this refinery for the past 20 years. Other people who have been, like, there's an African American community that's historic, that's lived in Richmond, you know, since before World War II. And all of the communities, there's actually a strong Native community too in the Bay Area. So we have, you know, a really huge array of diversity, which we're very proud of, except for in California, it is the same place that is everywhere, that if you are, if you're a person of color, you're much more likely to live next to a refinery like the Chevron refinery or a polluting facility. Even if you're middle class, you're much more likely to live next to these places. So we've been getting people together to talk about what do we want instead? How do we want to live our lives? What's the thriving local economy that we actually want that can replace the dinosaur that's been living in our backyard all this time? And part of what we've decided that we need to do, along with the neighborhood block by block organizing that Sandy has been doing, that we've been doing together, we've joined forces with other multiracial communities. We've built a state civic engagement program where we are able to contact 50,000 voters in every election. We're able to actually not just influence, but pass real policy that makes the possibility of shifting the local economy in Richmond more possible, not just in Richmond, but around the state. We passed a state policy called SB 535 that takes the money that the state is, the public funds that the state is using or is collecting to reduce greenhouse gases, and make sure that 25% of that, at the very floor, not the ceiling, 25% be invested, and that's billions of dollars, be invested in low-income communities to make this transition from the economy that we have now to the one that we want. So to me, it goes back to people power. It's people like Sandy who've been able to not just use their experience to decide what they don't want, but to create the solutions that are really going to create the new communities, the thriving local economies, the economies for life and for living that Sandy and her family really need. So I'll stop with that story.